marks 23 years since the end of um, the war in Liberia. Of course, that's the signing of the Accra Peace Accord, the comprehensive peace accord that brought to an end the 14 years of war in Liberia. We'll be talking more about that. But Madam President, let me just say welcome, and maybe we need to hear from you briefly before we talk to the team, the other team members.
Sure, thank you. I always like to bring special guests on UL President Hour. All the better when those guests are doing interesting and important things at or from the University of Liberia. And we have a very important occasion in front of us. As you mentioned, it is the 23rd anniversary of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accords. And so when I had a conversation with Prof. Sandy and Dr. Cornwall and Dr. Allen, we were looking for a way to make sure that the University of Liberia commemorated this occasion. So we decided to utilize the format of this show, because we know it will reach a wide audience at a time when it's really important. So if it's okay, I'd like to offer a few words about the occasion. This is
Yes,
what you would
please.
call a brief summary on the celebration of the 23rd anniversary of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord for Liberia. On August 18th, 2003, Liberia's warring factions signed the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, bringing an end to 14 years of devastating conflict. The wars left no Liberian untouched, whether at home or abroad. Fear, displacement, torture, and loss defined that era. Livelihoods collapsed, education and healthcare were disrupted, and infrastructure was destroyed. These scars remain visible in the daily life of Liberians. 23 years later, Liberia continues to wrestle with the legacies of war. Roads and infrastructure remain underdeveloped. Schools and hospitals struggle to meet demands and expectations, and the labor market cannot absorb the growing number of qualified young people. Despite decades of international support and millions in aid, Liberia is still described as a nation living under fragile peace. But in essence, Liberia's future stability depends on moving beyond fragile peace toward genuine reconciliation. Transitional justice systems can be a sure bridge between the painful past and a more inclusive, resilient process tomorrow. So the idea is that we want to use our experts at the University of Liberia to elevate these themes, to weigh in from their areas of expertise and give us all something to think about on this historic occasion that is relevant not only for Liberia, but also for West Africa as a whole and even the whole world. I can remember that time. I was still living in the United States, and I actually learned more about it from documentary films that covered the subject. But for those who are here or those who study it, they can give us special insights, and that's what today's show is about. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Prof. Sandy.
All right. Is Ambassador Slunter on this line?
Ambassador Slunter could not make it to the forum, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Prof. Sandy, as you heard it from the president of the University of Liberia, Liberia marks 23 years anniversary of, or the 23rd year anniversary of the Comprehensive Peace Accord. I just like to know from you, what does it mean to you personally as a, say, peace builder, say, peace educator? You just name one of the titles.
Thank you so much, Afonso. First and foremost, what this means to us, we will go into deep details. But let me take this time to thank Dr. Maparyan for sharing this hour with us in order to bring awareness and consciousness again to this republic and, like she said, Africa and the world at large about how this very important signatory of the peace accord brought sanity, liberty, and some level of freedom to the Liberian people who have suffered the anguish of 14 years of civil war. So in this year's celebration, we are partnering the Center for Migration and Diaspora Studies, headed by Dr. William E. Allen as Executive Director, and the Kofi Annan Institute, Dr. Rafaela Como, who is acting Deputy Director. We represent these two institutions, and we are forging our efforts to create this awareness, and we are here today. So first and foremost, we will ask Dr. Allen, who will give us a little bit of synopsis of why the significance of this program should be highlighted. Dr. Allen, please.
Dr. Cindy, thank you very much. Prof. Cindy, thank you very much. And Dr. Maparyan, I thank you for the opportunity to at least discuss this issue with the Liberian public. Thank you very much for the forum. And Joyce, thank you for supervising everything. The Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement, which was signed in 2018, in 2003, what it does for us is that it helps us to take stock, to take an inventory of where we are, giving what was outlined by the peace agreement. Let's not forget that the Liberian Civil War was an unusual event in Liberian history, very unusual. It led to the death of approximately 250,000 of Liberians. 250,000 Liberians lost their lives. 1 million was displaced. There was tremendous suffering. Social institutions were neglected. Infrastructure laid to waste. So we have an opportunity today to review the peace accord, see what is suggested, what is planned, and to see whether we have executed the things that were instituted. So let me begin first by just reading for precision. I will read what the peace agreement stated. It says, it was the formal start of the peace process. It laid the foundations for where we are today by laying out a number of steps for sustaining the peace. The signing of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement marked the first step in the process. The Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord also laid down further steps for the transitional justice process. The ACPA established a ceasefire and called for the implementation of a national process of cantonment, disarmament, demobilization, rehabilitation, and reintegration, or the DDRR, for ex-combatants. It also emphasized security sector reforms with a specific focus on the armed forces of Liberia and the Liberian National Police. The release of prisoners and abductees were also emphasized. A plan for voluntary return and reintegration of internally displaced persons and refugees. A program for vulnerable groups, including children, women, the elderly, and the disabled. The need to ensure human rights for the entire population. The establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The establishment of a national transitional government for Liberia, and political and electoral reforms, to mention but the most salient issues. And this brings me to the point of why am I actually here. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Diaspora and Migration Studies. Kofi Annan Institute is geared towards transforming conflicts into peace. In the process of that transformation, they talk about diaspora. And diaspora means the scattering of a people due to a disaster, either human-made disaster or natural disaster. In the case of Liberia, it was a human-made disaster, which was the Civil War. You had about 1 million Liberians being displaced. So the center, working along with Kofi Annan in partnership, is trying to trace those who are in the diaspora. Where are they today? Have they established families in the United States? Have they established new families in Liberia? What can we do to reach out to those who are in the diaspora? So this is one of the reasons why the Center for Diaspora and Migration Studies has partnered with Kofi Annan Institute to commemorate this occasion today.
Okay, so
That's really
President, you want sorry?
Yes, Francois. Just to commend Dr. Allen for this detail and summary and the significance of this program. So what we'd like to do at this point is to go to Dr. Como, who would drive a little bit deeper, because at academics, what we do in these processes is we bring information based on very scientific research. And we have done some research on the Liberian society within this country that informs some of the steps that should be taken, some of where we are, some of the shortcomings. And Dr. Kuma will just bring us up to date on what some of this research found and what are some of the ways forward that could be considered. And of course, how actors in this process, whether at the national level, even partners who are from international sectors, can help us navigate our transitional process. Dr. Coleman, you are welcome, please.
Thank you so much, Prof. Cindy. I think before I go into the research aspect, it's important to look a bit deeper into some of the legacies of the Liberian wars, because the war officially, formally ended 23 years ago, but the legacies of the war, they continue up to today. And I think Dr. Allen already alluded to some of these issues, like underdeveloped physical infrastructure, education and health systems that are not fully developed yet. There is an ever-growing demand for jobs by a young population, and there are no jobs available. So there are a whole range of issues like that. But really, when you're looking deeper, and this is one of the things that we do at the Kofi Annan Institute, is we are doing conflict analysis. We are looking deeper, because all of these issues, they are surface issues. They are not those things that sustain the problems that the country experiences. And when we look deeper, there are three main concerns that we can identify. When we look at Liberian society, we can see that the society is fragmented, that the relationships between people are no longer good. Relationships have been broken within families, in communities, within the state at large. And so this is one of the biggest challenges that contributes to issues such as drugs, crime that we see in the country today. The second aspect is that many people lack trust. And that means that people don't work together. And when we don't work together, we cannot build a state together. So when we really look deep and address these issues, then we can build the society back up. The third aspect that really limits Liberia from our analysis is a mindset challenge, a mindset that is held back by the experiences from the war and its impact. Because when people go through a war, many people, they tend to live in the past in some ways, and they are not able to build a future because there's a constant sense of preparedness for the next steps. And all of these three things, so broken relationships, a lack of trust, and this mindset challenge, are actually holding Liberia back from developing and sustaining the peace to the extent that we can become a prosperous country. So one of the ways in which countries can deal with that is through what is called transitional justice. And there are two different forms of transitional justice. One is to do with the legal processes. And the other form of transitional justice has to do with more people-centered processes. And we will go into more depth into these processes in the course of today's session.
Okay, so if you were to break this down for our listeners, the legal process, I'm sure you are referring here to this whole aspect of the War and Economic Crimes Court. When we did this research, there were things which Liberians were saying, yes, our friends outside are telling us this is what we should do to move ahead, but research and interaction, physical interaction with people at a personal level reveal what Liberians are really looking for when they talk about transitional justice. Do you mind highlighting some of the results that this presented for you?
We can look at that. I think I would like to start with a small caveat, because when we look at the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord does not explicitly call for a War and Economic Crimes Court in Liberia. What it does, however, it has a particular passage that also allows for legal processes. So in part of the preamble, the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord states that signatories are, and I quote, are also determined to establish sustainable peace and security, pledging forthwith to settle all past, present, and future differences by peaceful and legal means, and to refrain from the threat of or use of force.
Okay, that's very important. Can you elaborate that a little bit for our audience?
Well, what this means that the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord itself does not court for the establishment of a war crimes court or for the legal prosecution as such, but it also calls for the legal settlement of disputes. So that means there is a kind of a complexity in the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, which can be linked back to the time in which the accord was signed, because in 2003, the goal was to end the fighting. Exactly.
So there are clauses, there are statements, there are agreements which need to be unpacked in order to help us live with their reality for today and helping us move forward. So if you have this legal mention, and that could lead to the establishment of the court, but what are the challenges that going that direction, and especially using only that direction, could mean for transitional justice in Liberia?
Let me take you one step back again, because I think if we are looking at the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court, there's one important step in the transitional justice process that took place beforehand, and that's the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yes.
So when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established, one of the recommendations it made was to establish an extraordinary criminal tribunal. So this is where the recommendation to have this became explicit. Now, of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission didn't have as a mandate to establish such a court. The mandate of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was to hear people's narratives, hear people's stories, hear what people experienced during the Liberian wars, and to contribute to reconciliation. Unfortunately, and I think this is one of the big challenges we are still facing today, is that while truth-telling took place during the TRC process, I mean, according to the report, there were over 20,000 statements that were analyzed to compile this report. But the truth is that when you only have truth-telling and you have no further steps that can contribute to reconciliation, then the TRC has failed to complete its full mandate. And this is one of the biggest challenges.
And that's very important. I'm going to let you go through that, but that's very important because the commission was truth and reconciliation. So there should have been reconciliatory activities. There should have been reconciliation programs, reconciliation engagements, which should have either complemented or work alongside or in follow up to the truth telling. So what we clearly see is there were truth-telling, but there were no reconciliation or major reconciliation activities following this. So how did that limit the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And what dilemma does that bring to us today?
Well, I think if we look at further developments in the country's history, the subsequent governments tried to fill this gap, and they established what is called a roadmap to reconciliation in 2013.
Yeah, this is the 18-year roadmap to reconciliation.
Exactly. Unfortunately, or actually this roadmap outlines some really important steps. Very useful steps to contribute to reconciliation through 3 measures: by addressing the past, dealing with the challenges in the present, and building a future for the country. And I think there are some really useful measures in there. However, in 2022, the Kofi Annan Institute actually went around the country and was asked to do awareness on the roadmap to reconciliation in 2022. And we realized that in Lofa, in Nimba, in Sino, in River Ses, nobody had heard about the roadmap to reconciliation. So if nobody knows about this roadmap, how can it be implemented?
And how do they participate and contribute to the roadmap?
Exactly. So those are some of the challenges. So there are important steps that have been taken, but because they have not been acted upon and implemented, reconciliation is still far away.
And 2022 was 9 years into the roadmap, because the roadmap was developed in 2013. So 2022 was 9 years. So midway into the 18-year roadmap, many people around the country have not even heard about the roadmap. So that's a major challenge to reconciliation in this country, and people need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we move on to...
Sorry, before you go to the next point, I just want to come back to you, Prof. Sandy. I mean, talking about the truth and reconciliation process, I heard you talk about, I mean, just for the sake of our audience, when you talk about truth telling, there was truth telling. I just like you to break it down, because some have argued that people gave misinformation about some of the things that took place during the war. Perpetrators were, they think, giving misleading information. Some of them, will openly tell the hearing, for example, that yes, I led XYZ group, but we were not involved into XYZ thing. So, ordinary people felt that they were being misled. The fact that they saw certain actions, committed by that particular group, and the leader is saying they were not involved. So for them, they think that was not truth telling.
Alfonso, in our job as promoting peace and reconciliation in this country, or analyzing the issues that build peace and reconciliation, we do not pass judgment. Let's assume what everybody said was truth. People took a podium and said, I never kill a fly. People took the podium and said, I burned down that village and I killed 13 people in that place, and I raped 27 of the children there and burned the town and so forth. Let's assume all of that was true. But they got off that podium and they walked home, and till today, no one has asked them, the village you burned, the children you raped, the parents that you killed, and all of this that you destroy, how do we account for it? This is the question for us that is crucial. It's not whether what they said was the truth or not the truth. Let's assume that's the truth. But even if that is the truth, what is the next step? The committee was truth and reconciliation. How did that truth contribute to reconciliation? And what we really see is that when people said this truth and they walked away from the podium and went home and even are given lucrative jobs in government and other public sectors, or even in being great entrepreneurs, what we see is people now say Liberia is an intersection where people have done things, and what they can do is just to say that they did it, and it stops there. So if people do not see concrete action as to what this means and what should be done about the truth, quote unquote, that has been presented, this, we believe, is one of the factors for impunity. But that's not where we want to go right now.
Okay. You
So
also talk about.
Sorry, yeah.
You
I
also
just
talk
wanted
about,
to continue because
the
we needed to
reconciliation
come from this.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I just wanted to continue because we wanted to come to this aspect of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission made this recommendation for a tribunal, which we are setting up now as a war crimes court. But there are also other mechanisms which scientifically societies that have gone through this kind of situation have used, and they have benefited their people, and there are options that we could learn from. So that's where we want to drive this a little bit.
Yeah,
So
I suppose you. Okay, yeah. All right then. Go ahead. Let's go ahead. Too many things about this thing, So, but I mean, let's go ahead to the next point because, like you said, I mean, there are other things that came in the form of recommendations, right? That could bring people together and reconcile them. Because I was just trying to say the reconciliation aspect of it that you talk. I mean, Dr. Common talk about. Apparently, was really not carried out because of some of the recommendations that came from the TRC process, where maybe I should say downplayed, and that's why up to today you got people stay the way they are.
Mr. Judge, we will get back to some of these recommendations, and actually really based on our research that we have conducted in Monrovia and Todi district, give some information on what people actually would find useful as steps forward.
Okay, let's go ahead.
I think for now, let me go back to the recommendation of the TRC on setting up an extraordinary criminal tribunal. So this was one of the recommendations. The other recommendation for lesser crimes was to handle this at the national level. So there were two proposals within the TRC. Now, if we are looking at today, right, the current government has picked up the recommendation on the legal process. It has established the Office for the Establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court in 2024 and has since renewed its mandate. And in May this year, actually, the president submitted 2 bills to this legislature, an act to establish a War and Economic Crimes Court and an act to establish a national anti-corruption court, which were both submitted in response to these recommendations in the TRC report. Now, we are still waiting for the responses on that, so I don't want to go and speculate about this. But I think what we can talk about a little bit is what are the challenges around setting up an extraordinary criminal court or a war crimes court. And one of the challenges is that when we are talking about a court system in Liberia, only lawyers who've come through the Liberian legal system are allowed to practice here. So when we're talking about an international court, which this kind of extraordinary tribunal would be, we need to think about how can we handle this situation? How can we make it permissible for international lawyers to practice in Liberia? So this is something to just think about. The other aspect we need to think about is that according to the research that we conducted, and we interviewed 1,200 people. So this is not a small number of people we talked to. And 52.7% thought that the establishment of a War and Economic Crimes Court would be a good step. But when we are looking a little deeper, because of these legal challenges, for instance, among others, I mean, let me not talk about the economic challenges and so on. But then the alternative would be to look at more national processes. Now, when we look at this, our research showed that only 22.7% of the respondents were actually in favor of a national process. And this is because there's huge mistrust in the Liberian legal system among the Liberian population. So when we ask people, 67% said that they strongly disagreed with the statement that the Liberian courts bring justice for all. Let this sink in. I mean, this is almost 70% of the population that don't believe that the courts bring justice for all. But when we're talking about criminal courts, the hope is to bring justice for everyone.
And that's something to really pick up, because what that means is people's understanding of the War Crimes Code. And this is interesting because I had one of my students who had an assignment on this, and they actually submitted the assignment a World Crimes Court, which means the whole world is going to put this code together, and it's the whole world that will manage this code. So there will be no what do you call it, cheating. There will be no misunderstanding about it. Everybody will get their due in court. The truth about the matter is that is not what this is being set up to be. However, these limitations for a court and the number of people it picks up and so forth are serious limitations that I don't think many people really understand when we are talking about the War Crimes Court process. But please continue from there.
Yeah, I think you already mentioned one of the most important points is that the focus of a war crimes court is on those people who bear the greatest responsibility during a war. So that means the Liberians, they will continue seeing the perpetrators of those who raped their children, those who destroyed their property, those who stole their things. They will continue seeing them in the community, because really the focus of a war crimes court is on the key perpetrators. So that is likely to cause a lot of disillusionment, because when I believe that I finally have a way to get justice for what happened to me during the war, but the focus of the war crimes court is only on those
key actors,
I will feel disappointed, and the frustration could actually escalate rather than calm the situation in Liberia.
And that brings me to the question, Dr. Allen, you know, when the literature repeatedly points to the fact that most countries coming out of this kind of crisis revert to crisis within 5 to 10 years. Do you think that this is probably one of the reasons that people get disillusioned with the process that is instituted, and it rather cause frustration and things fall back into conflict? Dr. Allen, what has been your experience in looking at this?
Yeah, you know, I took a look at the research that Dr. Como mentioned. It was interesting, as she said, to notice that the emphasis was on an international court, that the majority respondents prefer an international court. And the question is, why would they prefer an international court to a national court? And she alluded to that. The thinking is that they will not get justice in the national court, but the international court will give justice. Their reference point may be to several cases that have been decided by the international court. So that's one reason why I think the issue of international court, or the issue of a crimes court, should be considered very keenly. Because if it is instituted here, as we say, the targets or those who will be investigated are those with the greatest responsibility, the leaders. And those leaders will be prosecuted. But those who executed their orders, the soldiers who executed their orders, they will go scot-free. And you can imagine that they live in a community, and the community sees people who had raped, who have killed, walking freely in the community. They will become disillusioned. So this is why I think the emphasis that Liberians are putting the emphasis on international court. But Dr. Como mentioned there's a limitation to that. One of the limitations is that only those who are trained, who are Liberian trained lawyers, can practice here in Liberia. But is it possible that the National Bar, the Liberian Bar Association would make an exception for that if the court is established in Liberia? I tried to call one or two persons to answer that question last night, but I didn't get an answer to that. So there's perhaps a possibility.
Yeah. Okay. Since we don't have the answer to that, we will hold that and we will do further research as academics. That's what we do. Dr. Como, would you like to wrap up to the next step so that we don't eat all of Dr. Maparyan's precious time on this program?
So sorry, can I ask this? So you conducted this research, like you said, 1,002 respondents. I mean, that's a huge portion of the population, and they're talking about not having trust in the national process. I just want to know whom have you shared this, result with, and what are you advising?
All right, we will come to that, Afonso. We'll come to that. Let's get all of the eggs out of the basket, and then we pick from among it.
Go ahead.
Dr. Maparyan, do you want to have a quick word in between here before we go further?
Sure. I'm finding the whole conversation really interesting. As someone who wasn't here when the war took place, but someone who has close family members who were there for the duration of the time, I have great interest in how Liberians think about the way forward, how Liberians reflect on the impact, including the enduring impacts of that experience. And I think your research sheds light. So I'm very excited to get to the part that has suggestions. I know you already mentioned the suggestion of having a global or an international tribunal or court, but I'm curious what some of the other suggestions were as well.
Thank you. Okay,
Cindy,
back to you. Yes.
Cindy, do you mind if I mention a point from the research also? Just one last quick point.
Please.
From the research, about 72.2% out of a group of respondents of 645, they concluded that children should be taught about the war, the impact of the war, the trend of the war, so that they will not forget what happened in the past. That's a very important point, because sometimes we want to forget about the war because it's so painful. You try not to peel back history, to expose all wounds. But there is a need that you teach children, or you teach history where they would know what happens in the war and they can try to prevent that. It is along those lines that we are collaborating with Kofi Annan Institute in conducting a research where we can write a children's book, that will be titled tentatively, My Name is Liberia. And in that history book, we'll talk about migration, talk about the diaspora, and we'll also talk about the Liberian Civil War.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Como, please take it from here.
Yeah, I just want to briefly go back to some of the issues with the War Crimes Court, and I will just raise them and not further elaborate. But when it comes to the War Crimes Court, we need to think about the question of amnesty, because in the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, the National Transitional Government was tasked to address this issue. And according to a news report by Front Page Africa from 2021, in 2003, they actually did so, and they granted amnesty to all affected by the War Crimes Court, all perpetrators of the war. So this is something we need to look into carefully when we are following this process of establishing a War Crimes Court. We also need to look at the fact that a War Crimes Court would cost thousands of dollars, millions. Would the money not be better spent on other things that people require more at this point in time? Are there other things that can contribute to reconciliation and peace in this country?
Well, be a little bit specific. We still have people living with bullets in their skin who have not had any medical attention. We still have people whose livelihood were completely shattered and they have had no redress, even support to get back on their feet and so forth. So if, for instance, we had some of the figures we're hearing for this war crimes court, it's around $300 million. Are you suggesting is there's something that maybe portion of it could be used to support some of the victim-centered approach in this process? Is that where you are alluding?
I think we just need to reflect carefully on what are the most appropriate steps for a country like Liberia that is still experiencing a fragile peace and which has limited economic resources, to think about where are those resources best placed. I think that's how I would look at this.
Thank you. Move forward, please.
But I think one of the biggest shortcomings of a war crimes court is that it focuses on the perpetrators.
Yes, that's a strong point.
This is where I would really like to make the emphasis, because when after the war, there was the disarmament, demobilization, rehabilitation, and reintegration process, which again focused on the perpetrators of Liberia's wars. And what happened at the time was that it caused a lot of resentment among people, because people felt that they had been the ones who had been the victims of the war. Now, those who were receiving training, financial support, and so on were the perpetrators of the war. My question is...
That created a lot of resentment in many communities.
And I think this is a cue to take going forward. So one of the key aspects of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord was a focus on the most vulnerable people. And this was one of the commitments. And let me just read a little extract. According to the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, the National Transitional Government shall accord particular attention to the issue of rehabilitation of vulnerable groups of victims, including children, women, the elderly, and the disabled within Liberia, who have been severely affected by the conflict. So that means this was one of the key mandates, but we have not seen this kind of focus really in Liberia. Is this something we should pay more attention to?
If I were the one answering, I would have said, yes, let's pay attention to that, because the victims need the attention if we have to move forward to healing and reconciliation. And if they are neglected in the initiatives, no matter how much justice and prosecution we bring to them, to the perpetrators, it does not respond correspondingly to those who have been victimized.
So when we conducted this research, we actually said we need to understand what are the biggest grievances that people have in relation to the Liberian wars, and what are the biggest effects that they are still feeling today. Because we need to start with this understanding if we want to address anything in a really sensible manner. We need to be basing our decisions on evidence. And we ask people about structural effects, economic effects, physical effects, and psychological effects in relation to the war. And we noticed that there are two main areas where there are long-term grievances. These are economic and psychological. And that means any transitional justice process that does not address the psychological and economic grievances that people express in relation to the Liberian wars is doomed, because it will inevitably not contribute to peace and reconciliation, because those are the biggest concerns that people have.
That statement just reminds me, like you said, this is the thesis statement of our whole discussion here today, that the people who this process should support are saying, hey, why are you doing all these elaborate processes? Why are you spending all this amount of money if you get it for this process? Here are two things that concern us the most. Psychological issues. Our minds are very affected. The stress we've experienced, the harms, the danger, the fears, which has not been taken away. We need to deal with that. Two, our livelihood, our means of income, our source of stability were taken away, and that needs to be restored. So if these two things are not done, we are very limited in supporting a process that moves us forward. That's a huge part of this discussion. Thank you for bringing that out. But please, can you conclude with the next steps?
I think I would like to really go back to what Dr. Allen was bringing up earlier, and it's the responses from the people of Liberia on what would they like to see to address the issues regarding the Liberian wars. And as he mentioned, 70.2% of the respondents thought that it was important to teach children about what happened during the wars to make them understand how bad it was and how to prevent wars from happening again.
It was a bad war. I can tell you, I lived through it. It was bad.
The second the second issue that people raised is that they were asking for improvements in the education system.
That is very important. When we have university students who cannot compose a friendly letter, this is grave. This is grave. The president of the university is here. Hearing this, we need to do something about this ASAP. When we have professors who cannot distinguish between the BHERE and the VERE, this is grave. We need to address this. Our teacher trainers need to really work harder to produce the kind of teachers that actually bring us quality education.
Then I think Dr. Allen already alluded to that, is this need for doing research and sharing information on what actually happened. People still feel that there is not much known about what actually happened. And that is related to writing history books. But also, and this is something that I know that there are some organizations in Liberia who have worked very diligently in these areas. But in general, this has not been addressed sufficiently. And that's the counseling and psychosocial support for Liberians. 25% of the respondents thought that this was extremely important. And I want to share here one of the unintended consequences of the research that we did. One of the biggest findings we had as a result of this research was actually that for many people that we talked to, this was the very first time that anyone had ever asked them, what has happened to you and how are you doing?
That's important.
So for many people, this was the very first time that anyone had ever asked them about this. And it was for many a big relief to be able to speak about it and to share their experience, and most importantly, to have someone who was listening with an open ear without judgment. When it comes to the Liberian wars, the stories are many and they are very, very complex, and perpetrators and victims can often not be distinguished. So when we are doing this kind of work, we need to approach this with the most open mindset we can, because there's a lot we can do even as community members. When we start listening to each other, we can actually contribute to this process.
Yes, but when people's minds are completely affected, they are living under stress, they are living under grievous circumstances, they cannot afford to make ends meet. How do they have the potential to listen to each other? This is where the challenge is.
It is a big challenge. And I think this is the biggest question we need to address. How can we, as a society, contribute to addressing those legacies of Liberia's wars?
The legacies of the war. This is important. This is very important. All right. So we want to wrap up. I see Afonso.
Yeah. So I wish we had all of the time, to talk about this thing. But I mean, we'll find some more time, to talk about some specific, things regarding this TRC process and the entire, peace process dating back from 2003 all the way up to today. But I just like to know from you, how can schools, universities, churches, communities, and organizations as well as the media help in preserving Liberia's peace history?
Maybe Dr. Allen can start with a few comments on that.
Mr. George, please repeat the question.
So I want to know how the media, the churches, schools, universities, community, organizations can help in preserving the peace history of our country.
Oh, these various social institutions you're talking about can play a role. One of the things we need to remember is that during the Civil War, nearly everybody was affected. You lost a friend, you lost a relative. Each person was affected in a different kind of way. So if we begin to reach out to those who were affected to understand the situation and help them, maybe we'll begin to turn things around. But one of my concerns is that there's a tendency, and this is not unusual, the tendency to try to forget the past. Because if you brought up the past in the church, for example, or in social institutions, the tendency is that you're trying to bring back the grievances from the past. But we have to face the past. The past is our future. In fact, it is based upon what we learn from the past that we can build a future. So these institutions should talk about the situation that happened in Liberia. Why did it happen, for example? We're reminding ourselves today about the Civil War. Why are we reminding ourselves? To take stock of the Civil War, to do an inventory. What have we achieved based on the peace accord that was signed in Accra in 2003? So every institution should talk about it. Pushing the situation under the rug will not solve the problem. We need to face the future boldly.
Thank you,
I think
Dr.
that
Allen.
research.
I just wanted to say, I don't want to put Dr. Maparyan on the spot, but I'm sure she would have some contribution to this based on her work as a psychologist to begin with.
I do. I wanted to start by saying that there's a natural synergy between higher education institutions and this work, because research and documentation are part of our mandate. They're part of our educational process. We can involve students and faculty and maybe even other stakeholders in the kinds of research and the kinds of conversations and the kind of practices that will lead to the kind of documentation and remembering that you're talking about, Alfonso. But at the same time, we have to remember the tremendous amount of vulnerability that comes for individuals by partaking in that process, particularly in an unprotected setting. And one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we have opportunities for our own community members at the higher ed institution, at the University of Liberia in particular, to learn about best practices for holding each other as we do this work. As a psychologist, I can weigh in and say that no matter what you say or don't say, trauma lives in the body. Yes. And so whether you talk about it or not, it's always with you. And if you don't express it, it can harm you on the inside. If you don't have a safe space for processing it, talking about it, going through the different shades of feeling and emotion and memory, that it can cause problems, whether mental or physical. So we owe it to each other to have healthier communities, to lean on the fact that we have to process and discharge these experiences, these memories, and what lives on in the bodies. I think as an educator, I also think it's really important to recognize that different generations had a different experience of the same war. And, one of the things that I can see as somebody who came from outside, I can see that people who came of age before the war, early in the war, late in the war, or after the war, have completely different orientations to the whole subject matter. And they have different psychological frameworks. And those frameworks are all interacting with each other without explicitly processing those differences. And so I think we too need to tune into that, even as we work to transform our university and we process the legacy of the war and the conflict on the university itself, we have to recognize that our own faculty, staff, and students have their own generational relationships to that reality. And we need to be sensitive about that. We need to acknowledge that. And we need to find ways to use it as a springboard to the healing that's needed institutionally.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Maparyan.
Dr.
Just,
Maparyan.
Alfonso, just one second. Can we start wrapping up? Because I know that's where you want to throw
So
us
you will
all
wrap up, but I got two serious concerns here.
Okay.
Sorry, I have to take Dr. Como back to this thing about, the establishment and running of the War Crimes Court in Liberia. You had conducted a survey or say research, and in that research, a lot of people are telling you that they don't trust the national process. They're telling you that they psychologically affected, by the war and other, conditions. And I don't know, maybe I missed out on that, but from the presentation from Dr. Kuma, it's like rather than using some $300 million to run a war crimes court, I think from my end, whether it is advisable, from your piece aspect, it is advisable to go back to, say, take for example, one of the recommendations from the TRC process is this thing about reparation. These victims of war are here like nobody cares for them. I can even refer you to the Liberia Massacre Survivors Association. A whole bunch of them there, facing some conditions.
We work with them.
So, in clear terms, Dr. Como, you think the establishment of that court, from the perspective of, the people you've dealt with and their different requests, to maybe national players, the establishment of that court in clear terms, you think is relevant as compared to diverting such amount, for maybe reparation purpose and other programs?
Alfonso, I wish I had another 5 hours to talk here today and to present the total research to you. Because actually we talked about all of these aspects, all of the recommendations of the TRC in this research. But today's session is just not long enough to present everything. So I just want to conclude with a few just highlights. This research was actually conducted together with students from the Kofi Annan Institute. It was conducted with representatives from the War Economic Crimes Court, the Ministry of Justice, the civil society organizations, and youth. So we actually brought together a whole group of young people to help us conduct this research, and they conducted this research on a voluntary basis.
And we want to say we train them to the sensitivity of conducting this kind of research.
So actually, we adopted a trauma-sensitive approach to research, where the person in front of us was what mattered the most, not the information. Because when we are talking about these sensitive issues, it's not about gathering information. This has to become secondary. It's about the person we see in front of us. And
so, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
And just to also respond to Dr. Maparyan, one of the things you raised is actually the generational differences. And this is actually part of the research design. Yeah. We designed this difference into the research and into the analysis. So the full report will hopefully be available very soon, and then we will share it widely.
Okay. So just before we take your parting comment, Prof. Sandy, any formal program tomorrow? You want to brush us through quickly?
I think Dr. Maparyan made a very good comment about this. We are using different approaches. In 2024, we had this very elaborate national program bringing all of the what they call diplomatic mission, civil society, the former warring factions who signed the accord, and the government face-to-face for the first time since the signing of the accord. We did that in 2024. In 2025, we brought experts from the various sections of the interventions for the accord, and they spoke on from their expertise what has been achieved, what are the challenges, and what are the way forward. So this year, we are using this method to just do a series of public engagements. So in the next 48 hours, we are continuing to do, we started early this morning. So we are doing this public engagement. So this is what we will do this year. So we will see which one has a better impact and which one has a far-reaching effect that we can use and we can learn from. And this is what we are doing this year. So we are not having, as it were, a formal program, but we are having a lot of these very wide, like your link here is gone wide, and I'm sure it will remain on for quite a while. So a lot of people will get the message and they will read and be able to dissect the message and be able to say, what contribution can I make? So we want people to really think through this and be able to join, as it were, the march to national healing and reconciliation in Liberia. That's our mission.
Okay. So I think we can take your parting comments now. I don't know how long Dr. Common will be here. I would like to organize something. Either you will come to studio, you and Prof. Sandy, to talk more about these processes. Because I mean, a lot of people.
Well, you can talk to Dr. Common without Dr. Allen.
Oh, okay. So that's great.
And Dr. Como is an employee of Dr. Allen.
Ah, okay. So I mean, no problem, John.
Let me just make that clarification. Yes.
I think all three of us are a team.
Yes, so we are a team.
Sorry?
The Kofi Annan Institute and the Center for Diaspora and Migration Studies. We are a team. We're collaborating on this.
So in fact, Dr. Allen, Dr. Allen will have to be a part of that arrangement, because we also want to hear, from the people in the diaspora when it comes to, the different things that happen. I mean, different, or say the series of conflicts in our country that made them to leave this place. Between that time and now, what are their thoughts about the way things are happening here and what needs to be done, from our end to reconnect them, all the kind of thing we need to talk about. So we'll organize something, Dr. Allen. I hope you can be a part of it so that we have a whole round of conversation around this.
That'll be great, Afonso. Look forward to that.
Right. So, I mean, we have to go. Anything final before I go to Dr. Maparyan? I see you smiling. I don't know what you'll share with us.
Dr. Allen, comments?
Yeah, go ahead.
Prof, can we maybe end up, then you can finalize?
Yeah, then Dr. Maparyan will be the last.
Finalize, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Dr. Allen, final comments?
Yeah, my parting comments would be that as we take stock of what happened, what began, what caused the Civil War, we should always be mindful that this was an unusual situation in Liberian history. So it is unusual. So we should look at it as a way to at least correct some of the errors of the past. What we can do to correct the errors of the past. What we are seeing here is that the emphasis, as you have mentioned, is mostly on the perpetrators, but the victims are ignored. So this exclusion here is a problem. I hope that as we prepare, as we move forward, we'll begin to think about ways that will include those who have been excluded in the process, because it was because of exclusion of the cause that led to the Civil War. It led to the coup of 1980, and then the aftermath was the Civil War. So we should ensure that we build an inclusive Liberian society to ensure that everybody has equal rights and equal participation in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Allen.
Dr. Coleman?
I think for me, when we are talking about 23 years after the formal end of a war, and we're looking at a country where the peace is still fragile, we always need to remind ourselves when we are in a difficult situation that dialogue and peace are the way forward, not threats and violence. And I think this is one of the key statements of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord. Let us solve our issues peacefully. Let us solve them through legal means, through dialogue, whatever the process that is most suitable and most applicable in the situation. Let us refrain from using threats and violence.
Thank you. And my parting comment will be that when we have scientifically gathered what the actual needs of people are in order to enable them to contribute significantly to the process of healing, reconciliation, and development of Liberia. I would love to see, especially our key stakeholders, whether government, whether our international friends, and every part of this society work to address those key concerns. This is not an option. If people do not have the right psychological mindset, they are not able to contribute effectively to the process of healing, reconciliation, and development. And secondly, their well-being. If people are not in the right state of mind, they do not have assurance of a tomorrow, they cannot contribute to building that tomorrow that they have no assurance that they will be part of. If I'm so hungry and think I'm going to die today, why would I have to build tomorrow? So this is just plain human understanding. So I really want to just emphasize that and encourage all of us, government, international players, communities, and everyone. Let's work to support everyone so that they are at the place where they can contribute their maximum potential towards our journey for healing, reconciliation, and development. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Sandy. Dr. Maparyan?
I just want to begin by thanking today's guests for being on the show and, more importantly, for their work. We're actually really incredibly privileged at the University of Liberia to have the Kofi Annan Institute for Conflict Transformation, as well as the Center for Diaspora and Migration Studies, as two of our most important intellectual centers of activity, focusing on issues of great relevance to Liberia historically, psychologically, institutionally, and in so many ways. It's one of the unique features of the University of Liberia that we have such scholars working on issues so germane to Liberian experience, and that people can come in Liberia or from elsewhere around the world to study with them, learn with them, do research with them. So I'm thankful that we were able to showcase their work and have this deep discussion about very serious issues on UL President Hour today. And as you suggested, Alfonso, I hope that we can keep the conversation going in a variety of ways. I'm thankful to Lux FM for always keeping its finger on the pulse of happenings at UL and linking that to the larger world. So thank you to all.
Thank you. Let me leave you with something, to think about. I don't know. Apparently you've observed it, but I don't want to send it from my end. Dr. Mapai is a psychologist. Dr. Allen is a historian. Prof. Sandy and Dr. Como are all peace experts. Have you noticed that Liberians are very angry? Is that part of the effect of the war? I just want to leave it with you. So when we organize some discussions, we'll talk also about that. So we want to hear from the peace experts, that time. But we want to say thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time, one full hour of this around the Accra Peace Accord that brought lasting peace to Liberia. I mean, you can argue, but it's lasting peace to Liberia. Dr. Rafaela Como has been here. She's from the Diaspora Studies here at the University of Liberia. Dr. William Allen is the head of that unit. Prof. Sandy has the Kofi Annan Institute for Conflict Transformation. Of course, the president of the University of Liberia, Dr. Lady Maparyan. They've all been here talking all about this important issue. Tomorrow, of course, marks 23 years of the Accra Peace Accord, the signing, of course, that brought lasting peace. So my name is Alfonso. We're back next Monday at 5 minutes past 4. Thank you so very much to our panelists tonight, and we want to say a pleasant night from our end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.